This is episode 6 of The Modern Disciple. We are at 6 episodes.
6 episodes, baby. I know it's the devil's number, but that's
Oh,
where we're
man.
at. So we have to at least do one more before we quit.
We're going to get there and then get past it real quick. But hey, so yeah, I'm Chris Van Buren.
Yeah, I'm Ryan Schneider. You know us by now, probably.
Yeah, I would hope so. I mean, if you're clicking play.
If you're watching this, you probably have heard one of them before. But,
Yes.
Today we wanted to come on, talk about a little bit about fatherhood.
Yes, Father's Day is approaching us, right? Maybe we're past Mother's Day, and
Yes.
Father's Day is coming up. So shout out to all the fathers out there.
Yeah, shout out to all the dads. And we are both young fathers. So we just wanted to come on and talk about our experiences so far, maybe some trials and tribulations.
Man, you know what? And we were having a conversation the other day. I don't remember what brought it up, but you brought up flashbacks because, I think we were talking, it was on Damaris, when we were talking about Damaris and him being a new father. You asked him, hey, are you still in that every 2 hour phase?
Oh.
And I was like, please. I was like, let's get past this part so I don't have to think about
PTSD stuff. Yes.
Yeah, I tell you what, man, that was rough. That was rough.
Oh, man.
But yeah, brand new fathers, man. My son Kylan, he is approaching 9 months at the end of this month.
And then Alice, my daughter, she's about 1.5 years. And what's funny is, even though Alice is how much, like 9 months older? Something like that. Older than Kylan, they're about the same size.
Yeah. they are about the same size. When we put them together, you see Alice walking around, and then Kylan's just army crawling, dragging his belly along the.
Well, people always look at Alice and they go, "Man, that 9-month-old, she sure can walk and she talks." And I'm like, "Yeah, no, she's like 17 months."
Oh shoot, that's so funny. But she's the cutest thing ever, man.
Yeah, well.
It's the eyes. It's the eyes that get you.
Baby blues. Baby blues. But, having flashbacks to the infant stage, those first 2 months, I think so far have probably been the hardest for me as a father so far. Me and Ashley, we would actually take turns where she had to shift all day until about 8, and then I would come in at 8 and stay up all night until 4 a.m. So I screwed up my sleep schedule.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like you don't even have a choice. Like, what about even in the hospital? Like, when you're in the hospital for those few days, I mean, it's like, what is sleep?
Oh, man. You just get used to it.
Yeah.
And people will always tell fathers, like, kind of try to scare them, oh, man, it's so rough. I mean, you get through it.
Yeah.
You get through
man, seriously. Yeah. I mean, it's about how you approach it. Mentally, really. For me, especially being a young father, this day and age, you really just gotta approach it with a mentality of gratitude. Like, I get to be a father. I get to get. As hard as it may seem, I get to get up every 2 hours and feed this baby while I'm on shift.
Yes.
Because as they get older, you miss some of those times when you were up with them in the middle of the night.
Right.
You're just looking at them, they're looking at you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure some of the fathers who maybe have kids who are grown up now can attest to this. But it's like, hey, just take every moment to experience what you're experiencing. It may suck at 4 a.m.
Yeah.
and you may be sleep deprived.
Yeah.
But I would always just think back to, hey, at least I'm not the one who had to push this thing out.
Man, seriously, man. Oh my gosh. And just on top of that too, like, yeah, it's all about just being present. And like you said, it's going to be rough, but the more present you are, the more grateful you are, and the more intimate your relationship can be with your child. And that's really what you want. Essentially, you want to be close with them. And I mean, even that right there, I think is a good kind of segue into like our relationship with God too, and how that relates to fatherhood, right?
Yes, because in your relationship with God, He wants to be intimate with you. He wants to be close to you. And I feel like a lot of times for moms, that comes easy. It comes with it. They grew in your belly. As a father, you're kind of on the outside looking in for a lot of it. Then if your wife breastfeeds, there's instant. That's about as intimate as you're ever going to get.
Right.
But as fathers, I feel like a lot of times people miss out on prioritizing that intimacy.
Yeah, and time is something that you can't get back, and so that's another lesson that I've learned as a young father. I mean, I knew that before, but I mean, time becomes so much more valuable when you have a child, because now you start to your life has now become not just you, and even not to go further, not just you and your spouse, but now you and this child who, Lord willing, you want to be there for until they become an adult and so on. And so now you realize how valuable time is. So the more you can be present in each moment and build that intimacy with your kid, that's something that being a young father, or I mean, even an old father, honestly, I keep saying that, but just a father in general, I have been able to appreciate in this experience so far. So
yeah, I mean, that actually reminds me of an ignorant Ryan before I had kids. So I was talking to, I think it was Debbie one day. That's my broker. I'm a real estate agent. Okay. I'm sure y'all all know that. But
shout out Remax.
Yeah, you're surprised the logo ain't
right.
But I was telling her, I said, Debbie, I keep hearing about all these people. They're so busy. I didn't have kids at the time. They're so busy. I feel like I'm a really hard worker. I'm not that busy. I have a lot of free time.
Yeah.
I can sit down for 4 hours at a time and just do nothing.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is everybody so busy with? And then I had Alice, or me and my wife had Alice, and I revisited Debbie about 2 months in. And I said, hey, remember that conversation we had? Why everybody's so busy? I said,
yeah,
I think I know the answer now. And that's with one.
Yes. Oh man. I've seen people, just the ignorance that you have before you become a parent.
Oh yeah.
Of just one, and then when you have the one, and you go to Target or Walmart and you see people pushing a stroller with another kid in the cart in the part they're supposed to be sitting in.
Yes.
And then another kid in the basket. You know what I mean? The basket of the cart. And you're like, man, how are you managing that?
Yes.
They're all within a year in age of each other.
Well, that was me. I mean, coming from 4 boys, we were all within 6 years of each other.
Man.
So my poor parents. But it kind of leads me to another thing that is our responsibility as fathers is, taking care of our family and being, and this is another area that I feel like modern Christian fathers need to kind of step up their game in.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that mothers can't do this, but it is the role of the father. It specifically says this in the Bible, to be the spiritual leader of the household.
Yes.
And it's kind of weird that nowadays it's almost viewed as a more feminine task to be the spiritual leader. I think you can see that in churches, even with more women volunteering. You can see it in a lot of families where it's the woman convincing the father to go to church. But that's something that I feel called to as a father, and multiple people told me this. My dad, Jay Reed, who is my youth pastor, both very intent. Were like, hey, you need to be the spiritual leader of your household. And that's a area that a lot of the modern church has just kind of failed at, I feel like.
Yeah, and I know a lot of fathers, especially young fathers, and even fathers who maybe didn't grow up in the church, but know that you have that spiritual connection. You're probably asking yourself, well, what does that look like? How do I do that? And one thing that was on my mind this morning, and kind of in preparation for this conversation, but also something that is on my mind constantly from my own mental health, is that it's important to remember that when you become a father, your life growth and your development towards God's kingdom doesn't stop. Because a lot of times we think that now that we have a child, everything is only like about them, and all our focus is only on about them. And when it comes to being the spiritual leader of your household, Jacob Smith said it great this past weekend at First Baptist. And I even shouted it out on our nonprofit page. And he said, as a father, you shouldn't aim to be a drill sergeant.
Right.
You shouldn't aim to be everything is my way or the highway with no explanation. But instead, you should lead by example.
Right.
And how do you become a spiritual leader? Like, how do you do that by example? Well, by making sure that your spirituality internally is where it should be, that you are constantly seeking first the kingdom of God in your own life. Right, so that your kid can see that as well, and your little ones, and whoever looks up to you as a role model, period, can see that and follow that example. Right?
Yeah, I know. It's quoting Jacob Smith again. I mean, it's about leading by example through everything you do. And yeah, that's a really good point you bring up, because your kid needs to see you going to church.
Right.
Your kid needs to see you living out a Christian lifestyle, you know, and it happens sometimes where, you know, maybe the father isn't, you know, leading by example and living such a very Christian lifestyle. And then they act surprised when their kid goes to college. And like Jacob said in his sermon, when they get squeezed by the world, what they soaked up will fall out.
Right.
Shout out to Jacob again, because I just straight up quoted him.
That was great sermon. Great sermon. Yeah.
But they act surprised when their kid goes off and they come back and they're like, yeah, I'm not into all that Christianity stuff.
Right.
And it's like, why? Well, because those kids have only seen it through words, not actions, or orders, not actions.
Exactly. And that right there is so essential, because I mean, when you look at it, God sent us an example, right? Like, God sent his son Jesus to walk this earth to be an example of the way we should live, right? So it wasn't just hey, here's the 10 commandments and everything else that you should do, like words from my mouth or words written down on a stone tablet. It was, hey, let me send you this example so that you can see it lived out.
Right.
And I mean, I think it should be the same way for us as fathers, is because essentially when we live this life and with plans to go to heaven, right? I hope, right? And so you do that by in the way that you live your life, and the way that you direct or do your best to direct your life towards God and towards his plans for your life. Right. And it's at the end of the day, it's for your own spiritual health, so that it can be carried on for generations.
Yeah. And I think that's a kind of daunting task. A lot of people are like, well, I need to lead by example. That's scary. Like, I don't want to be an example. I don't feel like I'm equipped to be an example, or knowledgeable enough to be an example, or good enough to be an example. I feel like the way you set an example is just to try. You know, Christianity as a religion, it's not like black and white, you know? If your faith is growing, if your relationship with God is growing, it's going to be evident in your life, and that's the best example you can set.
Yes. Yes. And you know what? That just you saying that makes me want to open up to this first note that I took, right? From Mark 12:31, okay? So for all my Bible buffs, is that the right word?
Bible buffs.
All right, I remixed one of the verses, so don't get mad at me, all right? I had to remix it for today's episode, okay? But everybody's pretty familiar with Mark 12:31, where it says, and I quote, "The second is this, love your neighbor as yourself." Right? And I read that earlier, and I was like, because like you said, it is a daunting task, and it is like it's a lot to put on your shoulders to say, I have to lead this family towards Christ, and how do I do that? And you know, I said I remixed the verse because I think the first thing we should go to whenever we feel the weight of that on our shoulders is love, right? And so to remix the verse, I said, love your child as God your Father loves you. And it probably says that in the Bible somewhere. It's probably not an actual remix, right? But I just saw that verse. I wanted to reword it. But really, I mean, so for me, I know lately, my kid, Kylan doesn't do a lot of things that make me think, oh, what do I do here, right? Because he's just crawling around and stuff. But every now and then I see myself in certain situations where, oh, man, I'm going to have to teach him about that. And then I ask, well, how? And then I ask, well, if I was in that situation, or if I was in a situation where I wasn't sure what to do and I needed some guidance, then I would ask God for it. Right. In my own life. And then I would say, you know, what would I ask God? And what I tell myself is when it comes to Kylan, you know, what I'll do my best to do is to ask myself, well, how would I want God to teach me this in my life?
Right.
And it's going to start with love. I want God to first say, hey, like before I correct you, I love you, right? Because I need that, Lord. And then,
especially when it becomes a toddler.
Man, gosh, he's already got so much energy. But so I mean, I think it all starts with just loving your child the best you can, and then doing everything out of love, just like you want that love from God as your Father.
And really touching on doing it out of love and starting with love. Like I just said, Alice is a toddler right now, so it's like, ooh,
it's a lot,
throwing tantrums, all this stuff, and I have to remind myself sometimes, and I'm like, okay, just try to come at this with love, like an understanding. It's like, oh, well, she doesn't have her emotions in check,
right?
She doesn't know what she's experiencing, like she doesn't know what she's doing is, you know, a no-no or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, and especially and you can really look at it as a toddler being like our relationship with God, where, you know, sometimes God will come at us with love. I mean, Jesus came at us with love when he sacrificed himself. Sometimes we don't know what we're doing is wrong, especially if you're like a new Christian.
Right.
You might not know what you're doing is wrong, and that's okay, but it's always important to learn from it.
Right.
And really listen to what God is trying to teach you through it. Oh, I know what I was going to touch on.
What?
I was going to talk. Okay. I'll just
you got
start
me
talking
interested
about
now. I want to know what it is.
It's going to be like about mentors.
Oh, let's do it.
Yeah. Okay. Let me.
Oh, that'll be perfect. Because I'll talk about the being chosen to be a father too. So
got it.
After you talk about what you're saying.
Yeah, and one important point that I think every father who's been doing it for a while, who has older kids, I really stress the importance of finding some sort of mentorship through, whether it's your father, whether it's, you know, some people at the church who maybe have older kids who have done it already. Like I know my mom, I know I'm switching over to mothers, but she'll get reached out to by other mothers all the time where she's like, it's mother with 4 young boys. They're like, how the heck did you do this? Please help me. And as fathers, as men, I feel like we don't like asking for help that much.
Yeah.
But I really want to stress that the importance to find mentors who you kind of see yourself in, a similar situation in, who maybe are made up of the same dynamic, like girls and boys. Like, going forward, it's going to be important for me. One of my spiritual mentors and mentors in life is my youth pastor, Jay Reed, who still lives here in town. Well, he has 2 daughters. One's in high school, one's in middle school. And going forward, I will probably lean heavily on mentorship from him just because, learn from someone who's already done it and who's done it the right way, and you can see who's done it the quote unquote right way.
Right. Man, that's so essential. And if you're anything like me, like Ryan said, you have a problem asking for help. If you're anything like me, you have a problem telling somebody when either you don't know how to do something or you're having trouble with something in your life.
Right.
And I think it's great that you brought that up because when I was talking to Maddie earlier about what we're going to talk about today, she said, oh, you should touch on the fact that, hey, dads have flaws. Like just because you are now a father doesn't mean that you are meant to be perfect and you are now flawless. Like you're going to probably carry a lot of the same flaws that you had before fatherhood right into fatherhood. And what you're saying is so important because we should make it a point to be aware of those flaws and to talk about them, to seek out guidance and mentorship in order to, I guess, combat them in a sense.
Right.
Those flaws so that we don't project them onto our young ones and then the cycle continue from there.
I like that point because the more I talk to more dads and who have older kids and who have gone through this phase of infant, they maybe have kids in high school or graduated already. You'd be surprised, like from the outside looking in, you think that they are kind of flawless. You think they have it all figured out, but there's some, like, everyone has flaws.
Right.
That's a great point.
Yeah. And building that community, and I guess this might be a good time to bring up the nonprofit, but and you might edit that out somewhere. But what did I say first? Oh,
community.
So you spoke on building a community, and that was kind of one of the ideas in my head whenever we started the nonprofit that we have called Ripple Effect Fatherhood. Essentially, it was to create some kind of platform where fathers, young or old, could get direct and indirect guidance and mentorship from other fathers. So, for example, right now we have our YouTube channel where we do interviews with other fathers, which Ryan has been on. So if you haven't watched it, go visit Ripple Effect Fatherhood. Check out his interview. It was great. But a lot of fathers, what we hope is that a lot of fathers can go there and watch an interview, watch a conversation between myself, brand new father, and more experienced fathers, and get answers to some questions that maybe they're afraid to ask, like myself, right? Like I had to force myself to get on, create a YouTube channel and start asking questions that I really want answered, instead of going to people directly, because I've always had, that's a deeper issue. We'll get into that later. This isn't a therapy session. However,
next episode, tune in. That's a sneak peek.
Therapy, VB therapy. But I think that building that community of fathers and having that community of fathers, especially for young fathers these days, having that group of men who have been there, done that, that you can lean on for guidance is so vital to the presence of more fathers.
Right.
You know?
Right. And for older fathers looking at this, or, I mean, even us, if someone has an infant, don't be afraid to kind of not, I don't want to say like tell people what to do. But, I'll just
shoot them straight. No, I'm just kidding.
Tell them.
Tell
if
them
you're
like
not
it is.
breastfeeding. No.
Right.
If you're one of these fathers and you see another father, you know, go try to build that relationship. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not saying you have to tell them what to do, but build some sort of trust with these people. Like, don't be afraid to do it.
Right.
Because more people would probably be open to it than you think. And that can look like even just getting coffee.
Yeah.
And that's something as Christians we're also called to do that we've touched on before, just to reach out to people and get to know them and see what they're struggling with.
Yeah.
And as maybe we should start prioritizing that as fathers as well. And I think your nonprofit very much prioritizes it because it's its whole message.
Yeah, yeah, and even this conversation is giving me ideas on more ways we can do that. But it's at the end of the day, it's so important, just because of the problem that we have in our society with the absence of fathers. And so, yes, community, building relationships, and even we mentioned Joseph earlier, right? Because even if you are a stepfather or an adoptive father, right? They need love too. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like they need guidance too, especially like the fathers who are fathering to non-biological kids.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's I don't know. I couldn't tell anybody about that. But having a community of fathers, you know, there's a lot of fathers who have their own biological kids, and they're also stepfathers within the same household. And so, yes, if anything, if you get anything out of this message, we hope that, you know, it encourages that community and that mentorship for fathers to lean on one another, because I think that's big time stuff.
Yeah, community, mentorship, and you know, just leading your family.
Yeah,
that's kind of the 3 big points. But I feel like that's a pretty good point to end on. I know this was a shorter, more conversational episode, but
yes.
Hey, that's the way it goes.
Yeah, I mean, and honestly, like the last thing I want to say, because I talked about gratitude in the beginning, right? And so I just want to leave my fathers and anybody else watching with this one verse, right? But it's Genesis 18, verse 19. And it says, and God was talking about Abraham, but just look at this through the perspective of a father. It says, "For I have chosen him so that he will direct his children and his household after him to keep the way of the Lord by doing what is right and just, so that the Lord will bring about for Abraham what he has promised him." So when you think about yourself as a father, whether you're a stepfather, whether you are a biological father figure, or whatever the case may be, in your role as a father, not only are you a spiritual leader, but you've been chosen by God for that position. And as we go through life, we know that everything is about perspective. And so I just hope that verse blesses somebody and allows you to change your perspective and look at it through God's eyes, through God's optics, your role as a father. So.
Yeah, God put you there. Try to use that placement to make a difference, because that's what God wants. So,
amen.
Awesome. Well, we're going to be back next week. I think we're going to have a guest. I don't know who yet, though.
Okay.
Got to figure it out.
Well, hey, y'all let us know who you want to see on here.
Let us know. Also, let us know if y'all want to hear anything.
Yeah.
Last night, that's how we came up with this topic. We asked someone.
Yeah.
So,
I think it turned out great. So shout out to Tyler.
Yeah.
for this topic.
Tyler Vanacek. All right. The Pest Patrol. Shout out Pest Patrol.
Yeah. Plugging everybody this episode.
Oh, hey, we got to keep the businesses going. That's how we pay for all this.
I love it.
All right. We will see y'all next week.
All right.